Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, how many of us as sales professionals or business owners have to present? We have to sometimes do formal presentations. We have to do a demo. Sometimes we have to do a speech or we're a keynote speaker, or perhaps we're at networking events and we have to ask questions. And then it comes to our turn and we have to share our value prop, what it is we do. And in those moments, we get sweaty palms, our heart rate speeds up, we get dry mouth, we feel like we'd rather be anywhere but where we are. And so my guest today, Linda Ugelow, is a speaking confidence coach. She's a podcast host, and she's the author of the book, Delight in the Limelight. And she helps her audience overcome their fears of being seen and realize your dreams. And so for any of us who are, we'll have that it's actually called glossophobia, the fear of public speaking. But it doesn't necessarily have to be on a speech. If any time you have to speak up in a meeting or in front of customers and you get this reluctance, or you get in your head and there's fear of failure, fear of saying the wrong thing, comparing yourself to someone who got up in front of you and is a way better speaker than you, how do you get out of your head and how do you leave that behind so you can still transform your audience? And Linda shares that some of this is built in our subconscious from when we were children. Perhaps we were labeled, we were known as a certain child, and that is what we are bringing with us to our current day, and it's holding us back. And so some of us are aware of this and others are not. And so when we become aware of this, we can free ourselves from any past patterns that no longer serve us, but it's also keeping us in this fear, this fight or flight. And when we do that, we're really inward making of ourselves, and we're not able to connect and transform and move our audience. So Linda has a 3-part framework she talks about. One of them is reveal and heal, restoring safety, and just making it safe and being compassionate with yourself, that we don't have to be perfect, that we have to get up there and share a message that will help even one person, and then repattern your habits. So really looking at what have I done in the past, or am I doing now that is not serving me and is holding me in this place that's not able to move my audience, convey my message, whatever it is. And so you don't have to be in a global stage to this. This is just communication. Could be speaking to your boss, speaking to your colleague, but not getting in your head about it. So if you're a sales leader, I would encourage you to take a listen to this. Share it with your team as a business owner, as a sales rep. What can you take that Linda suggests and apply it immediately to your own conversations and see the difference you yield? Take a listen. As always, I enjoyed it. I'm always learning. It invited me to loosen my grip a little bit and just be really in the moment and be free and trust that I have this. Let us know what you think as always. And thanks for tuning in. Well, I am delighted to bring Linda Ugelow to the podcast. Linda, welcome to the podcast.
So glad to be here.
Well, this is one thing, when you think about communications, presentations, whether they're virtual, whether they're in person, networking events, demos, or some people might be on the stage and doing a keynote. I think it's a really, I guess I would say, a scary skill. And I think the term is glossophobia, that people suffer from the fear of public speaking. But I'm delighted for you to come on and share your experience that I know will help people, I guess, first identify that this is a concern or an issue, but more importantly, be like, how can I get past it? So why don't you start just very high level? I know in reading your bio that you struggled with public speaking from a child and had a lot of fear around that. But, look at where you are today. You're a speaking and confidence coach, and you also host a podcast. So you've clearly you've clearly overcome it. So why don't you give us a quick backstory as to what that journey looked like for you?
Looking back, it's always easier than looking forward. And I realized that this has been a lifelong journey for myself, starting from being a kid up to college that hardly ever spoke at all. And then thereafter, I had a very bad speaking experience in grad school where I was a movement specialist, expressive movement specialist, and my advisor wanted me to present the work that I was doing to the department. And I presumed it meant the other students in the department. But when the presentation came, it turned out to be all the department heads. And I don't know if anyone in your audience has had this experience, but I felt like I was becoming disembodied.
Mm.
It was like I didn't have a sense of like where I was, and my mouth got so dry, bone dry, that I opened my mouth and no words came out. And this was back in the early 90s, and we didn't carry around water bottles with us. I don't think there were such things as water bottles back then. And I didn't even have the ability to ask for a glass of water. So I
Mhm.
was standing there feeling quite mortified, wishing the earth would open up and I could just like fall in. Finally, my advisor figured out what was going on and brought me some water. But after that, it's kind of like this downward spiral. And I made a decision that I'd never speak in public again. And I didn't for about 15 years. Now, I just want to contrast this that I, at the same time, and for 40 years, have been a performer on stage, been on stage all over the world. I've had 7 cameras on me while I'm dancing or while I'm singing, totally fine, but I couldn't introduce a song.
That's fascinating how in one area you're such an expert and then something else triggered you that you had that fight flight or in your situation you froze. And just one thing what you said there is when they explained your role to you right there, that's a form of communication, and there was a breakdown right from that get-go because the expectations were already unclear, right? And so you can just see the various layers of and styles of communication, and that first one was misunderstood, and as a result of that, you had a freezing moment on stage. And so talk to us a little bit about why you think you were okay in some instances when you have 7 cameras, but introducing a song you struggled and you froze.
It was because of this process that I dove into in my master's program called Authentic Movement, where I practiced closing my eyes, feeling whatever wanted to come out in terms of movement. It's kind of like intuitive movement. And at the same time, there's a witness. And the practice, as we are following whatever wants to emerge, kind of like improv, let's say improv, but
Mhm,
in movement,
mhm,
that there's an unconditional friendliness to the self. So there's no judgment. And of course, you don't start off that way, but over time, you develop that sense of it's okay for me to do whatever I'm doing, and it's okay for me to be seen. So I was able to be on stage and allow myself to be seen. And there was like one dance that I did that was a trance dance. I had my eyes closed and people would weep. They'd come up to me afterwards and just say, "This was so powerful." And I just was crying. And how do you do that? And the way is that I'm connecting inside with myself. This is something that you talked about with David Olcott some episodes ago. You connect with yourself and you're allowing yourself to be seen. And when you don't have any kind of self judgment or worry about what other people think, then you can really be in the present. And that's where the whole methodology of that I use to help people overcome their anxiety, whether it's in conversations or networking or presentations, is to see what is getting in the way from us being in the present. And usually, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, the triggers. We're getting triggered from past experiences. And it's hard to grow up and not have these triggers because we've all been in an educational system that scrutinized every move we made and penalized us for every mistake. So, of course, we're worried if we made the grade and what other people think and if we're good enough because in school, you were valued if you were perfect and if you didn't make you showed up, you checked off all the boxes. And it's very difficult to be like at your A plus game every day of your life because we have all
mm.
kinds of things that happen to us. So I feel like we all come out of the educational system with some kind of trauma of worried about being judged. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, because of that, we judge ourselves before other people can judge us because it's a mechanism for us to protect ourselves. So, my method, which I call the inner freedom framework, because what we really want is this freedom to express ourselves in however we feel appropriate, but to enjoy this experience of expression, of talking, of communicating, of telling stories and getting into it and really enjoying it. Because speaking is our human design. So we want to have that sense of freedom to be dramatic. And I've enjoyed listening to you actually on your podcast because I feel you're very expressive. And I love all the ways that you use your voice. And this is how we want to be as we speak with other people. We want to be able to highlight what we think about the things we're saying by the way we say it. It's almost like we're a tour guide as we speak. The things we emphasize, whether it's by stressing that syllable, just like I did this syllable, or if we get louder because we get really excited, or that we pause because we want someone to take it in, that we have this kind of flexibility, but you can only do that when you are able to be in the present moment. And you can only be in the present moment when you don't have these triggers.
Mhm. Oh, that's amazing. I just want to pause for a moment there. When you said back to our childhood, we have triggers. Do you think we are aware of those triggers, or do you think subconsciously there's something holding us back? And then maybe when we go back and do some inner work as to like working with a coach, or why am I doing this, that they reveal themselves?
I think it goes both ways. I've had clients come to me that say, "Oh gosh, I know exactly where this comes from. It was Sister Catherine in Catholic school who wrapped my hands when I couldn't remember what 5 times 7 was,
Yeah.
or when all the kids burst out laughing when I didn't know where Romania was on the map,
Mm-hmm.
or my parents, you know, put me down or criticize me every day of my life, or sometimes there are obvious things.
Mm-hmm.
Other times people come and they say, I have no idea, where does this I believe this, I believe that it's a trigger, I just can't figure out where it is. And that's when we have to start. Well, in both cases, usually, even if people think they know where it is, usually there's more than one thing that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you know, when we have a certain belief system, so we may have an experience, like I had many experiences, but one of my experiences was my sisters would be very jealous of me every time my mother put me on a pedestal saying, Linda's such a good girl, why can't you be more like Linda?
Mm-hmm.
And then they would attack me, kick me in the shins, they'd say, shut up, stupid. So it was like, duh, of course I don't want to be the center of attention because I learned it was dangerous to be the center of
Yeah.
attention. So here I have a belief that it's dangerous to be the center of attention, and then it continues to be revealed as dangerous to me
Mm-hmm.
in different ways. So it's like when we have that belief and we're in that position or in some kind of similar situation and we have that trigger come up, it's like we have to fight against that. It's very difficult for us to just take at face value what's going on because we are being activated by this memory that's like, watch out, remember this happened last time or this happened before, even if we can't remember. Our body remembers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, what's just coming to mind now, have you ever heard of a Pono Hopopono?
I've done a lot of research on this and I love the mantras. I call them the four
Yeah.
mantras. And the reason why is when I wrote my book, Delight in the Limelight, I wanted to include that.
Yeah.
But because of my work in the music field, and we did women's world music, so we were always using music from other places. We were very, very conscious of not appropriating music or just having that conversation of taking things from other cultures that didn't
Mm-hmm.
that weren't comfortable with the white people taking over. So, like for instance, it would be very unless we were given specific permission, we'd never do something that was from Native Americans unless it
Mm-hmm.
was offered to us. I had a Hawaiian dance that was offered to me, and they told me that the dance I had been doing, I didn't have permission to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially with this that was came out of the Hawaiian or Polynesian tradition, I wanted to make sure that that was okay to, talk about
Mhm.
in the book. So I reached out to a healer that I knew in Hawaii, and she said, "This is not traditional Hawaiian. The person who has been marketing this has been saying that it is,
Mhm.
but," she said, "even I, as a Hawaiian healer, I do not have access to um, leading Ho'oponopono. And it's much more complex and multidimensional than this person who is promoting it
Yeah.
is. They've borrowed something, made it their own." She
Mhm.
said, I said, "So should we not use it?" She said, "No, if something works, use it, but don't call it that.
Okay. Well, so I didn't know that, but just for those listening, I'm not gonna call it anything, but it does.
Call it the four forgiveness mantras."
I find it is helpful, and just for what you saying about these triggers and these childhood, a lot of that is our inner child needing to, be loved and heard, what's ironic is that if that's not addressed, it manifests into adulthood. And so how can "I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, and thank you." And so when you just think about your sisters and n- carrying that with you, you just look at the impact of, if I can do something like that, whether you say those words or not, but it gives you permission to be in the present, to forgive yourself for whatever past you remember or don't remember. And I think when you do that, you let so much in, and more than speaking, but you're giving yourself permission to be, when you said that intuitive dance, that freedom, like, and it's so, freedom is such a great way to be, because you're not attached to the outcome, you're not inwardly focused, and you're totally can be connecting to the other person. But how often can we do that, because we're hanging, there's chains on us, and whether they're physical chains, emotional chains, whether we know it or not. I just think when you can start working on releasing whatever language mantra you use, you can really see the powerful impact it has in your everyday life.
Absolutely. And in fact, I did use those four mantras with my sisters. I also used EFT.
Yeah, okay, excellent.
Yes. And I
Tapping.
even think that you can use simple forgiveness, but be specific, like, "I forgive you, mom, for
Mhm.
not paying attention to me."
How can we offer ourselves forgiveness and compassion, because we are human, and whether we're speaking, and it doesn't go perfect, it's never going to be perfect, but if it's not the way we want it, like, how can we be compassionate with ourselves, and just reflect on it and go, okay, what can I learn from that?
Yes, yes. Another thing I think is really helpful is to practice forgiveness. So I have a nighttime ritual that I've done for years that I call the five things. It's, I think, of five things that I'm proud of from the day. And it could be, a good sales conversation or a presentation, something big like that. Or it could even be, I made a good meal for myself, or I sat down and I meditated, or I
Hmm.
took a walk. And then I do five things that I forgive myself for. And oftentimes these are things on the to do list that didn't get done. Or it could be, yeah, that I didn't turn off my notifications before doing a podcast and the ringer went off.
Worst things could happen. I would forgive yourself on that one.
Right, exactly. And if it
Hmm.
feels sticky, like if that doesn't feel like enough to say, then we might do I might do
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
four mantras. But when you do practice forgiveness, it comes
Hmm.
more easily. You can, when you practice letting go, it's easier to let go. And then if you make a mistake in the middle of a conversation, like you can't think of a word that you know is the right word you want to say, or you just did something differently than you intended to, then you can more easily forgive yourself very quickly in the moment and just
Hmm.
say, let it go.
But don't you think, that it also humanizes you to say, "Oh god, that word escaped me for a moment." Like, people are looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm always in favor of like thinking of lots of different ways that you can play with something humorfully. That's not a
I
word,
don't
is
know,
it?
it didn't sound right.
With humor, or with poise, either just to kind of glide over it and not make a big deal, or
Make
to
fun of
have
yourself a
fun
little
with
bit.
it. Yes. In fact, I remember I was giving a presentation at a Rotary some years ago, and I got to a slide and I thought, I have no idea why I
Uh-huh.
put this slide in here. And I said to the audience, I have no idea why I put the slide in here, but I know it was for a good reason. So
Yeah,
give me a minute
yeah.
and think about it. And I thought, and I was thinking, oh gosh, it doesn't matter if I remember, I can just move on.
Hmm.
But then it came to me and I said, oh, yes, if you're not prepared, that can also cause speaking anxiety. And people started to laugh. And then I realized the irony of it. But afterwards, the president of that Rotary Club came up to me and she said that was her
Hmm.
favorite moment
Yeah.
of the talk.
Oh.
And she hired me as her coach. So, yes, when we make mistakes, it
Hmm.
humanizes us, but especially if we're able to handle it with
Yeah.
poise and
Do you
composure.
know Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx? Quick side story. She was doing a talk, and she's got 4 kids. She's a working mom. She's a billionaire. She's fantastic. And midway, she's like, "What was the question again? I forgot." And I just thought everyone. I think she got a standing ovation because and I think she said something like, "Mommy brain is real," and everyone in the audience is like, "Yeah, it is." So that just humanized her, normalized it, and just it also connects you to your audience. I always say people connect to your imperfections, not your perfections.
And the other thing is that when you do something like that, you
Yeah.
are in the moment and
Yeah.
people appreciate that.
Now you started talking about your inner freedom framework, and I think we took a hard right turn. Do you want to go back and let us know what that framework is?
Yeah, we'll just review it. So the very first thing is to reveal and heal, to reveal what are the root causes. Because if you don't know what they are, you can't heal them. It's very difficult to heal something that is invisible. And this is why I think actually speaking anxiety and nerves are a gift because it makes it easier to uncover what's getting in the way. And those things, whether you work on them or not, they're there and they're going to impact you. They're going to impact your conversations. They'll impact your overall confidence in your work. So it's worth it to clear stuff away. I mean, we're adults and we can be mature enough to say, yeah, we got stuff.
Mhm.
Let's clear it away. So that's number one. And the healing modalities, we covered that also. And the second phase of the inner freedom framework is restoring a sense of safety. And that can be our environment and how we encourage the environment to create a sense of support and encouragement as opposed to uh, a vicious competitive edge. And if we work in that kind of environment, it may be worth it to look at how we can either create a little mini bubble for ourselves or to find, like, say you work on a team, to find ways to like initiate support and encouragement with each other if that's not the culture of the team. But it's also so it's support on the outside, but it's also support on the inside because well, I'm sure you talk about this quite a bit, but you may worry about what other people think, but we can be our
Mhm.
own harshest critics. So it's important for us to look at how can we be the most encouraging that we can be for ourselves. So we may want other people to be our biggest fans and supporters, and it's nice when they are, but no one can be there for you 100% of the time. Everyone has their own lives, they have their own concerns, but you can be there for yourself 100% of your time. So commit yourself to being an inner ally to yourself rather, and just recognize that when you do put yourself down, try to be aware that you're doing that. Like, notice when you're
Mhm.
being mean to yourself, notice when you have some kind of limiting belief. And it's not like you're not allowed to believe those things, but you can think, okay, I hear what you're saying, but can you say it in a nicer way? Or how can I find the most supportive, encouraging way so that we're not just building our relationship skills with one another, but we're building our relationship skills with ourselves.
And is this, Linda, so that we are, I guess, when we're up there speaking, we're doing it like we're loving ourselves, we're encouraging ourselves, we're not hard on ourselves. So we're going up there almost relaxed and giving ourselves freedom to give to others. Is that why you do that?
Yes, it's all about so you can be in the present because like some people say don't think of yourself, think of your audience. Well, that's easy to do
Yeah.
when you're in the present. But when you're getting triggered or when you've got, things like, "Oh god, I wasn't as good as that person who went up before me," or "That person's a natural. I'm really kind of like a fraud. I don't know what I'm doing." I mean, that's not going to help. That's not you being in the present with other people. That is getting triggered from stuff that happened in the past. Because if you have those kinds of thoughts, you can be sure that either those things were said to you or you had experiences where you
Mhm.
concluded
And
those.
so I've had that, and just for those listening, like if someone's doing a, I don't know, a presentation and someone in front of them just killed it, and you're thinking, "Oh my god, why do I have to follow them?" Or, you're a keynote or whatever it is, what are some ways that we can reset that and acknowledge they were a great speaker, but not allow it to take away from what we're about to do? Is there something we could think or do?
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to like really honor and accept ourselves just where we are. We know what we know, we don't know what we don't know. Everyone has their own lane and everybody has value
Mhm.
to share. So, one way that I like to, for me, that works is I have a little mantra: stay in your lane, stay in your lane. I mean, we can't be where we're not. You just can't.
Mm.
You can't be where you're not. So you may as well be where you are and honor
Mhm.
and own it. Own it. So if you have someone that you're following, I mean, give it up for them. Just say, "Wasn't
Mhm.
that amazing?" And let yourself kind of like give that kind of positive reflection
Mhm.
so that you open your heart and know that we all have pieces. We all have pieces to the puzzle called life. We all have pieces to the puzzle called sales. We all have pieces to the puzzle called careers or whatever it is. So that even if you're just bringing one little idea that's going to help someone, that's that's what it's all about. I mean, how many talks have you listened to that you remember what everybody said? Very, very little. But you might say, "I remember that speaker. They talked about this
Mhm.
one thing." That's all
Yeah,
it needs
and
to
I
be.
and I love the idea when you do acknowledge someone who's gone in front of you and really highlight them. I think it says a lot about you. But sometimes I see people like self-deprecate and say, "Oh, great, now I have to follow Linda. I'm never going to be as good as her." And I just think, "Oh, you've now invited your audience to look at you really and pinpoint things out." So I just think there's an acknowledgement, but not at the sake of putting yourself down.
That's right. It's like while I was writing my book, I was putting little quotes at the beginning, and I learned this song, as you know, I was a singer, and it was about sunflowers. And it's like at the end it says, "You are among so many tall flowers, so
Mhm.
stand
You could
tall."
sing that.
Sunflower open underneath, you have only begun. Yellow and bright, you are among so many like flowers in sun. So stand
Oh,
tall.
beautiful.
And it's around.
That's
It's
so
around.
nice. And
So,
the one
yeah. Oh, thank you for inviting me to say I haven't sung in
no,
public ever on a
this is the
podcast.
first
So,
on the podcast too, so that's amazing. And one thing just to add to, stay in your lanes, also I always that quote, comparison is the thief of all joy. And I just think if you've made it up there to present, to share your message, your story, and you're so in your head about the other person, like you're denying yourself an opportunity to perhaps transform your audience, or like you said, like give one person a different way of thinking because you allowed that comparison or just to get in your head. And it's just like, oh, if you can, just be in that moment and own your energy and what you can uniquely bring to the table. Like it was just, if you could work towards that, it's such a game changer.
yeah. I think this is a great segue
Okay.
for the third phrase of the Inner Freedom Framework, which is to
Okay.
repattern your habits. Because if you've lived in kind of like the limited space of being nervous, that affects everything. It affects the way you stand, affects your energy, the way you breathe, the sound of your voice. So in repatterning, it's kind of like we've cleared that stuff away. you've cleared your mind, and now you can work on what I think are the real skills of presenting or delivery or expressing ourselves. How we use our voice is so overlooked. And it's not just, I mean, we speak through our voices, which come from our bodies. So we tend to have this idea that, oh, speaking, it's kind of like this thing from our brain, it comes out of our mouth, but it's not part of us as a physical being. That's completely it's a missed opportunity, because when you enjoy the sound of your voice, when you sense the vocal production and the vibration and the tonality, then you are in the present moment in every syllable you say. It's like all this. I'm working in a little module right now on loving and transforming the sound of your speaking voice. And one of the things I've been saying is every vowel deserves to be
Mhm.
heard, because a
Yep.
lot of people mumble or they're down in their throat and they're not really projecting, because that's several reasons why people go into vocal fry. That's kind of a common thing that people do. Or, we speak too softly, or we're just like so fast, there's no punctuation. We're trying to get through a script, and we're not really settling into what is communication about. It's about not just ideas, but it's feelings. And if you're not connected with the sound of your voice, you're not connected inside your body and your breath and your presence, then we're only halfway there. We're only halfway in our own presence, and we're only halfway in who we're speaking to. So when we can anchor ourselves or ground ourselves in the sound of our voice, in our vocal production, in the way we express our words. And we're not only creating space for ourselves, but we also make it more interesting, easier to follow for our audience,
Mhm.
whether we're just on a podcast like we are now, or whether you're on a sales call, or you're taking your time in a networking circle to introduce
Mhm.
yourself.
And when you said feelings, because I'm a huge proponent of the emotions and feelings, and I do the KFD. What do you want people to know, feel, and do? And then you work backwards. But what are some ways, Linda, we can elicit emotion or feelings in our audience, to move them to, see our point of view, to, invite us to share more? Is there any tactics or techniques you can share there?
I think it's about experimentation. I'm a big proponent of exploration and trying things out. And you can make a list, let's say, of different kinds of energy, like bored. Oh, I'm so bored. And you can say your whole sales pitch or your talk, feeling very bored. And then you can say questioning. And then you go through the whole thing, and you go, and you're kind of like in a sense of confusion or questioning, and you try out that energy. And then you go authoritative. So you can kind of play with all these different ways of dynamically expressing yourself. But I maybe I haven't gotten there yet. It's possible I haven't gotten there yet, but I prefer to think about, how do I feel about what I'm saying right now? I think of it as being a tour guide. Like the way I deliver and express myself, I am helping to highlight what I think is important to hear about. But as I said, it may be that I just haven't grown into like how to make an audience feel a particular way. I think I think people want to feel understood. So I think these are things that you're already doing in sales. I mean, you're empathizing, you show your audience or your client, a potential client, that you know where they're coming from and that you're here to listen. And I mean, all those techniques that you do. But in terms of like making them feel, I think that's basically, they want to feel understood and that you have the solution
Mhm.
for them,
Mm,
right?
and I think that freedom, especially people who are perhaps new to sales, they're just given a script and they just they're kind of like a puppet in someone's hands up their back. But just having the freedom to really check in with your audience and play around with it, and only because I've been doing it for so long, like, I have no problem doing that, right? And I can oscillate between different Karens and different styles and see which one resonates and which ones. And sometimes when I do a talk and I just hold that pause longer, like 2 extra seconds, and you see, wow, they're leaning in or they got it. But are you confident and comfortable enough in yourself to play with that and just, iterate and hold things for longer to see what the difference is? Because then it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Absolutely. Did you ever see that wonderful TED Talk about how to sound
Who is it
smarter?
by?
What's his name? Is it
I
Michael?
don't think so.
Somebody?
No.
I'd have to look it up. I think it's
Okay.
called How to Sound Smarter. And it's hysterical because he's saying, "So I have nothing to tell you today. Nothing at all. I have zero, nilch, da," and he's, like, saying it all with this sense of, like, his whole body language, his voice delivery is so fantastic. I have all my students watch it because first of all, it's hysterical. It's so true that if and he says, "If you turn off the volume and you just see me, I look like a guy who really knows what they're talking about." It's very, very funny. I recommend
That is
everyone
funny. Well,
check
that's
that
funny
out.
because I tell my clients to, when they're evaluating or observing a call, I say watch it with the video with the volume down and just look at your body language. And if you have the other person, if it's like side by side, watch their body language, because if they're backing up and you see them going like this, you might have come across a bit too harsh or abrupt. And that's why I feel the importance of practice with your tonality, with your messaging. And the biggest thing I am such a huge proponent of is pausing like 3 to 5 seconds and allow what you've said to sink in. But everyone hates silence and they have to fill it. And I always say it might be the first time they've ever been asked this question or heard of that. Give them a moment to just formulate their thoughts, process it, see how it, like, you can see them going, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let me overlay this into my business and see, and just give me that moment. And I just think you're denying them such an opportunity, and just pause.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when people, when sales reps or sales leaders are, maybe they'll now take a different look at, it sounds like we have to do a lot of inner work before, the inner work prepares us for the outer work. So we've done that. We've given ourselves freedom. We're present. We're compassionate with ourselves. What are some things that we can do apart from what you just shared about just, exploring and being okay to try things on? Is there any best practices that we should be doing in terms of presentation to really ensure that we give our audience exactly what they came from, that it's an exchange of value for time? Is there a few things that people can, okay, if I can just do these three things as a starting point, I'll be better than I was yesterday?
I always recommend, first of all, if you're going to be doing something big like a presentation, don't just prepare what you're going to say, but prepare yourself physically and vocally. So stretch your body out. Do a little stretching beforehand. Open up your shoulders so your posture is good. Open up your voice. Do some vocal, like ah, oh, whatever. Like warm up your voice. People might say, "Oh, my voice is shaky," or "I don't feel really strong." Well, no one goes on stage performing without warming up. So, as a speaker, your voice is your instrument. You got to warm it up, whatever that means to you. If you know some voice, vocalises, you can do those, or just make lots of sounds so you can rely on the
Hmm.
sound that's going to come out. And then think of, like, what is your intention? What is your hope for the audience? And what's your intention for yourself? So what you were just talking about is, like incremental improvements. There's so many things that you can have fun with as you present. Like you can say, this time, all I want to do extra, I want to pay attention to that. I can feel my feet on the ground. Or this time when I talk, I want to be able to take pauses. So I'm just going to notice how every once in a while, I'm going to take a pause and just let the audience, integrate
Hmm.
what I just said. Or I'm going to be aware. I'm going to be open to whatever mistake or flub I make and handle it with poise. Or I'm going to, let's see, what else could it be? I'm going to look people in the eye, or I'm going to notice how I don't like to look people in the eye. Or I'm going to kind of like allow my arms to be freer when I speak and just see what
Mhm.
comes out. So if you go into speaking with some intention for how you want the audience to feel or your whoever you're speaking to, and also you have some kind of little intention for yourself, then you always feel like you have this growth going on. And especially if you can have a little journal and just say, this is what I intended. This is how it
Mhm.
felt. Maybe you say, I totally forgot to do it. I had my intention, but I forgot to do it. But that's good too, because then you realize that you maybe that is too much to do right away. And you ask, well, what could I do so that it's easier for
Yeah.
me to do next time? So maybe while I'm talking to my friends or I'm at the dinner table or I'm at, whatever, I'm going to feel my feet on the floor. So you practice in your everyday situation. And I think that's the best thing for all of us to do is we're speaking all day long from morning to night. We may as well utilize all the speaking we do to practice these kinds of things so that it's not just in the high stakes moments, but that it's in our
Yeah.
everyday
No, I love
moments.
when I read stories to my kids. I get so because it's a chance for me to practice, right? And the pausing and even seeing when they're leaning in. Sometimes they're like, "I don't wanna hear a story," and then I'll start and they'll come in. I'm like, was it the decline in my voice that brought them in? 'Cause they're forced to listen to that's my airtime.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me give one more tip. So let's say you're working with a script, a sales script. I recommend you play around with every sentence. So let's say, I don't know, can you throw a sentence out to me?
We pride ourselves on the best customer experience.
We pride ourselves on the best experience. We pride ourselves on the best customer experience. We
Mhm.
pride ourselves on the best customer experience. We pride ourselves on the best customer experience. So you can go through the whole sentence, say it emphasizing different words, and just feel what that's like. And then you can say, do the same thing, but with different, let's say you're a parent and you have a book that has elephants. We pride ourselves on the best customer experience. We pride ourselves in the best customer experience. And so you play around with that and then suddenly you have such a range of what you could do that you can say we pride ourselves on the best customer experience. And that may be the way you say it that time, but another time it comes out slightly differently. And you can do that because you're not locked into
Mhm.
one groove and your habitual, this the repatterning the habits. You're not saying it, we pride ourselves on the best customer experience. Maybe that's your habit. There's
Mhm.
no feeling in that. So by playing around with every line in your script in different ways, making it fun, making it expressive, dramatic, then when you go to actually say these things, you're embodying it in a much broader way with much more variation and access to
Mhm. I love
expressivity.
that. And even when you intonate on the various words, it changes the meaning of it.
It sure
Yeah, I
does.
think that for me, what this sounds like is I play music, and when you separate bar by bar versus looking at when my kids, I'm like, just start from this bar, but they start all the way back from the beginning, and you just isolate and you work on one little thing, and like you said, work on it outside of these high stakes environments. So you're practicing if it's pausing in your conversations at the dinner table, anywhere, even with your spouse or your friends, that this is who you are becoming in life, not just in a presentation.
Yes, yes, yes. My husband and I have a morning ritual. He comes down the stairs. I'm usually already at my desk, and he says, "Good morning," like a really big, robust voice, and I say back, "Good morning." And it's our little vocal game that we do, and it came out of when I was unable to use my
Mm.
volume, and I wanted to be able to speak with more volume, and so this was one of the games. We came up with several. We also have one that we do in
That's fun.
restaurants.
Do you wanna share what that is?
Sure, sure. So I we have a habit, and I had a habit of speaking at a particular volume and thinking this is the volume I should speak at in a restaurant.
Mhm.
So my husband said, "Okay, now let's speak a little bit louder." And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna speak a little bit louder." And he said, "You can get louder still." And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna get even louder." And I look around, nobody's looking at
Yeah.
me. No one.
It's all in your
And I realized, oh my God, I've been keeping myself within these two close walls. For what reason?
mm,
I made a rule for myself that was arbitrary. And we can roll down the hill, we can skip down the road, we can twirl, in public. It's okay. No one's gonna care.
mhm. That's a gr
But we hold ourselves back. We inhibit ourselves because we are also probably traumatized from teenagehood where we're worried about what others are gonna think and that we don't wanna look stupid or foolish or whatever. But, we all appreciate expressiveness. We look at 3-year-olds and we go, "Oh my god, they're so
Mhm.
unselfconscious." I wish I could be that way. Well, you can.
Yeah, I love that exercise because that showed you firsthand, like, it played it back to you saying, "Linda, nobody's looking, nobody cares." And that's when you realize, "Oh my god, I've been playing either small or quiet or whatever." And I just tell my kids, again, back to my kids, like, "Fly your freak flag, like, you be you." And the thing is, I feel with this generation, they do. Like, my kids will wear their socks really pulled up, and in my head, I'm like, I'd be made fun of if I was a kid wearing that. But I'm like, "You go, like, they're not no one's matching." And I'm like, "You go, I love it." But something
Well, they're
happens.
benefiting from our generation, I think, where
What
we I don't know what we did. We rebelled. I mean, I see that when I work with clients, I often say, you're breaking generational
yeah.
cycles. And that's what we're all doing, and I think that's what we can all help one another do. As you let your kids do that,
Mhm,
and we can say that to one another, let's be our own selves. Let's discover what who we are and how we want to express ourselves, and trust that people are going to be drawn to us because we are authentic.
mhm. I love that, and the older I get, the more I let go and just come out, more authentic and more real and raw, and I realize it's not for everybody, but that's actually doing me a favor because I'm creating my little vibe and a little slice that I know of the people that I am for. And so what I'm hearing and just getting at, if you kind of go full circle, is just freedom to be and speak, your language, leaving the past and the stories behind that don't serve you. But just that freedom, that love and compassion really starts with yourself. And when you can embody that, it transcends and relates, and you can relate to your audience through that.
And people feel that in you. They feel that you are comfortable in yourself, and they're drawn to
Yeah.
that because when you have a sense of ease inside yourself, that frequency
Hmm.
resonates with other people. They feel at ease. When you feel uptight,
Yeah.
that also reads. So it behooves us to do this work on ourselves so that we can be as effective as we want to be. And we can have as much fun as we can doing it.
I totally agree with that because I know, we are all energy and whatever frequency we're vibrating at, that's what we're going to attract. And I see people up there and they're nervous and you're just like, my hands are sweating for them. I'm like, just take a breath. It's okay. Like, I just want to go give them a hug. I'm like, it's okay. But then the people who are and they're not cocky, but they're so comfortable. Like, you just see everyone in the audience's shoulders come down because that energy we're all picking up on, and we're like, yeah, and we're leaning in like, what do you got for us? So it's even as a speaker for me, I've benefited from this conversation of just chill, like, get out of your head and just have a bit of fun too.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
one last thing before we wrap up. What is your take on humor and adding humor into a presentation or a talk?
I think it's advantageous, and I have with my keynote run it by a couple of people to add a few, like,
Yeah.
humorful perspectives. Just a line here or a line there, It's great when you can make an audience laugh, and laughter just there's so many studies about laughter and humor that it allows us to learn better.
Hmm.
It creates bonding. So, yeah, as much as we can. Sometimes we come across it like I did with that slide that didn't work.
Hmm.
I mean, I tell that story all the time, and it brings out a chuckle from the audience. And whatever we stumble upon, use it again.
Yeah.
Self-deprecation, we wanna use humor more about ourselves or about the situation that someone can relate to, as opposed to using it at someone else's
Yeah.
expense. We don't wanna
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. No, I think humor, it adds levity, and it definitely, people learn, they remember more. So I think it's good. It's just being tasteful. And, I definitely think you need a little group to run it by and just make sure this is sometimes I'm like, that's hilarious. And they're like, no, it's not.
Yeah, well, it's part of the experimentation process. It may not be for that person, but it could be for a different
Yeah.
audience.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. Well, listen, you've given us a lot to think about, from your three-part framework to having a little fun, having some humor, and ultimately just being present, so you can be in the moment and allow your authentic voice to come out and move your audience. So, Linda, if folks are listening and they want to learn more about you, connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think the best thing, so we can continue the conversation, is my speaker preparation checklist, which are all those things that I talked about that you are going to benefit from and be more present if you keep them in mind before you do a presentation. The preparation checklist you can get at lindaugelow.com. That's ugelow.com/rituals.
Okay. We'll have that in the show notes for everybody. So thank you again, Linda, for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.